Hello and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, ruefully admonishing someone for requesting a Jackson Browne song from your Eagles tribute band, or else a scrappy upstart, stripping the vinyl off your amplifier because you heard it would improve the tone, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the last Friday of January 2018. Happy New Year. How are you? Thank you for being here. Before we get started with the show, as always, I just have a little bit of housekeeping here. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, here's where I'll be. January 26th and 27th at the Ann Arbor Folk Festival, February 4th through 9th on the Cayamo Cruise, and then I'm going to be doing some headlining shows February 12th at the Blue Door in Oklahoma City, supporting Steve Earle February 26th at City Winery in New York City. March 6th, I'll be headlining in Cleveland, the 7th in Pittsburgh, the 8th in Columbus, March 9th in Ann Arbor, March 10th in Toronto, and then finally March 11th in Buffalo, New York. It's been a long time since I've been to Buffalo. I'm looking forward to getting there. If you're a new listener to this show, and I would expect this month for that to be the case for many of you, we have about 2 years of shows in our archives that I hope you'll go back and check out. If you're a regular listener to this show, but you've never heard any of my songs, we should rectify that. So please head on over to Spotify and just search the words Intro to Joe Pug, and a playlist will come up with a few songs from all of my different records that'll give you a pretty good bird's eye view of what I'm all about and what my music's all about. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here are 2 quick, painless, entirely free things that you could do to help out. First, you could rate the show from within your podcast app. You just open the app, click the search button, type in The Working Songwriter, and then click on the reviews button to leave one of your own. The second thing that you could do, also from your phone, is just share the episode with a like-minded friend that you think would dig it. That's just as quick and easy as the rating process. Within your podcast app, you just click on the little square with the arrow coming out of the top, and then it will open up a menu for you to text it or email it to friends. I tell you what, though, you sure could just go old school and just tell somebody about the show. Go analog. Tell a friend about the show if you like it. That's all the housekeeping I have. I think you would be justified in wondering how this particular episode came together, because we've been very fortunate to have many talented people on this program so far, but Brandon is certainly our first guest that has headlined Wembley Stadium. So I'll tell you, because this story is kind of a trip, and nothing else like this has ever happened to me before. A few years ago, I was getting set to release my album Windfall, and the first single that we released was called If Still It Can't Be Found. The next morning after we released it, I got an email, and I remember exactly where I was. I was at a gas station in Texarkana, Arkansas, gassing up my van very early in the morning before a long drive. And in my inbox, there was a brief and very kind email from Brandon Flowers of The Killers about this song of mine. And immediately after reading it, I got a text from my manager saying that his representatives had reached out about my contact info, so I knew it was legit and not just someone messing with me, which was honestly my first thought. And that was it. He had me out to open some of his tour dates in Europe that summer, and we got to know one another. It has been one of the nicest, out of the blue musical friendships I've ever had. I think I mentioned on last month's show, or maybe the month before, but I talked about a moment where I was standing on a terrace of a hotel in the Swiss Alps and thinking that I had been transported there on the wings of a song. And it was that tour with Brandon's solo project that I was talking about. I mean, I felt like a song had grown wings and had flown me, from that gas station in Texarkana across the ocean to that hotel in the Alps. So anyway, we kept in touch ever since, and the Killers are on the road supporting their new album, Wonderful, Wonderful. And when they came through D.C. this month to play, I pulled on Brandon's coat about taping an episode for our plucky little podcast, and my God, he agreed. So very grateful for that. Thank you, Brandon, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoy this month's episode. My guest this month is Brandon Flowers. Born the youngest of 6 children in Henderson, Nevada, he worked a series of menial jobs in Las Vegas after high school before answering an ad in the Las Vegas Weekly. It had been placed by guitarist Dave Kooning, who was looking to start an original band. Soon, they were joined by bassist Mark Stormer and drummer Ronnie Vanucci, and they became the Killers. When most American labels passed on them, they took a flyer with a British independent label. Radio 1's Zane Lowe played their debut single, Mr. Brightside, and something connected in a way that every young musician dreams of in their bedroom. When their first album, Hot Fuss, was released, U2 tapped the Killers to open their Vertigo tour, and Bono famously declared, "We need him on the radio, his voice." Between 2003 and 2017, they released 5 consecutive chart-topping studio albums and have sold over 22 million records worldwide. They've headlined Glastonbury, Lollapalooza, Coachella, and pretty much any proper name festival you care to think of. The Killers have been nominated for 7 Grammy Awards, 7 Brit Awards, and 2 World Music Awards. For a decade, the band released an annual Christmas single with all the proceeds going to charity. That tradition raised over $1 million for Project Red in its fight against AIDS in Africa. Brandon has also released several studio albums to critical acclaim, although he stated in the past that he would have preferred for those to be Killers albums. Last month, the Killers came through and played DC's newest venue, the Anthem. And while they were sound checking, I set up a few mics in Brandon's dressing room, and before their set that night, he was kind enough to sit down and tell me about his journey. All right, take me back. You're like 24 years old. You've answered an ad in a weekly paper.
Yeah.
Your band has basically self-produced an album. And you're knocking around the Strip, playing to kind of ambivalent audiences because you're playing like Morrissey-inspired rock, and it's in an era where like Limp Bizkit is on.
That's right. Yeah.
Is on like the radio. So how do you go from that to 18 months later, when U2 comes through town, Bono's bringing you up on stage and you're singing? Can you take me to that window there and what that ride was like?
Yeah, it was there are all these different. Examples, people always call it the roller coaster ride or whatever it is, and that, it was exactly that. It was just like we got strapped to a rocket. You know, we had never left the country. We had, and all of a sudden we were going everywhere. None of us had passports. None of us had cell phones. It all happened, really quickly.
Wow.
And and it went from, in particular, the U2 connection. You remember they had that amazing, the Elevation tour. They had the Heart, and it lit up, and Bono would work the Heart during the stage, and it was and I paid $100 one night, and I got this is about the time that I met our guitar player Dave Kooning, and I got a ticket from a scalper, and I was inside the Heart, and I got to see one of my favorite bands play, and it was so exciting. And then, like you said, it went from that and just starting a band to 18 months later, they came back to Vegas, and I was asked to join them on stage, and it was just it was just all. It was so surreal.
Was it
happened
terrifying?
so fast? It happened too fast.
Was it? Yeah, well, that could be debated, but was there like a terror to it, or were you just so young and it happened so fast that it was like, well, this is just what's happening now, and you just went with it?
Yeah, we didn't know anything else,
right.
And we're one of those few lucky ones that some people, as you know, go around and tour and for years and years and don't get the that lucky break that we had instantly, and we put some time in, but we didn't. Nothing compared to what most bands do.
Sure. Was there a moment in that arc when you personally or you guys as a band where you just had a moment where you thought to yourself, "Oh, this is happening now. Like we know it's going to take off." Was there like an acute moment that you remember?
There were all these boxes that started to get checked. Getting any, kind of recognition from people that we admired was a big deal to us, obviously.
Yeah.
And that was always really exciting, and it really felt like something was happening then. We got to open for Morrissey, and knowing that he knew who we were, and referenced us in interviews and things like that. David Bowie came to a gig in New York, and it was it was like, oh, we must be doing something right here.
Man, goosebumps.
Yeah,
really. Do you remember a particular high on any of those tours?
Yeah, I think those were the ones for us, because the gigs were so. We started off playing. Opening for a band called British Sea Power in the UK, and then Stella Star around the US, and we would play for 25 minutes, play 5 songs, and go around, and it just felt kind of breezy, because the sets were so short.
Yes,
and it was It was basically a party. We'd go and play for 5 songs, and then the rest of the night you're at a club.
You can get into trouble with that.
Yeah,
I found over the years.
Yeah, so it was a little, lucky for us. There were really no casualties in the band to that time.
Yes,
because it could have gotten strange. But yeah, I don't know if there were any particular moment that stood out, but we were having a ball, and it was fun, and there weren't as many responsibilities as we have now, and there wasn't all anything to live up to yet.
Right. You mean responsibilities family-wise?
Yeah, and I think just I've taken on some weight of responsibility as we've gotten older and have more records, because I'm starting to realize what an impact music had on me, and now I'm trying to repay the favor or something. That's
interesting. So you feel like you have a responsibility to music because it transformed your life so wildly?
Yeah, I think even the way. Even the person I am and the woman I married and all the way down to all of that stuff, I think some of that, speaks to the music that I was first introduced to.
Yeah.
I think, there could have been 2 roads. Gangster rap was really big. Yeah. And there were kids that were, my buddies that was what they gravitated towards.
Yeah.
And my brother gave me the Cars' greatest hits. And thank God bless him. Yeah, and that's maybe saved my,
Yeah. Rick Ocasek saved my life.
Yeah. Benjamin Orr, Rick Ocasek, man.
That's interesting. It's very clear through your actions that you feel a responsibility to it, because, look, with all the success that you guys have had, like, you don't need to be out here on the road pounding it, you know what I mean? And you didn't need, like... There's a lot of bands that have to keep working because they got to keep working. But you put out those 2 solo records, and so it seems very clear to me that it's important to you.
Yeah, it is. I think it's all that I think about. I have obviously 3 sons now that take up a lot of time. But when I'm at home, I'm very immersed in that.
Yeah.
And then, when it's work time, I'm able to give myself up to it. And I've seen so many great shows, I think, in my life, and been touched by other people and their talents, and it keeps, that fire just stays lit underneath me.
What are a few of those shows besides that U2 one where you were in the center of the heart
Yeah.
that touched you in that way?
Yeah. My first, I saw, so there are specific moments. I think I have these, it's funny, I have a photographic memory where I saw Morrissey, again, going back to Morrissey, when I was 16 on Halloween.
In Las Vegas?
In Salt Lakes.
In Salt Lake.
And there's this, out on the Salt Flats, there's this great little venue, and it's just out on its own. And he was touring this album called Maladjusted, and there's this song called Trouble Loves Me on that album. And it was just, for whatever reason, I go back to that song a lot, and I think about his moves, and everything I was affected by the way, the passion that he's, in which he delivered the song, and it was incredible. I mean, I was a fanatic at that point for him. And then later on, I got more into American music.
Yeah.
And so I've had some great experiences. I've seen Springsteen a few times, and it was strange to have that be overtaken by music again, 10 years later. It was almost like a renaissance that a lot of people don't go through. I was going through it all again, but it was this new genre of music.
It's really hard to be touched by music like that past the age of 25.
Yeah.
You really have to work at it.
Yeah.
I think. Especially when you work in music.
Yeah.
And you see so much of it. Do you have any conscious techniques to stay inspired by music?
No, I need to do better at it. I notice myself listening to less and less of it. And I've been making a conscious effort to listen to the music that I grew up listening to, because that's the stuff that I'm definitely nostalgic about it.
Sure,
but it does something for me. And I just recently, we were talking about earlier, moved back to Utah, which is where I was when I fell in love with music.
Yeah,
and so I'm getting these strange memories, and just from the like, say it's snowing. And I get these sort of flashbacks to a certain record or a certain song that I was listening to when I was 13 or 14, and how it made me feel just because it's snowing. And I'm in that same zone of the world. It's strange. It's powerful.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, to think of I think anyone who's a musician and does it for a living had some version of that moment between 12 and 20 years old.
Yeah.
And I think we spend a lot of our creative lives going forward doing exactly what you just said, like activating that wonder.
We're trying to find it.
Again, yeah, it's really fucking hard to find, man. It can be.
Yeah. I chase it, man. I chase it.
You have to.
I try to explain it to my wife. Yeah. And it's not that it falls on deaf ears. It's just, she just doesn't quite understand the turmoil.
Yeah, man. But yeah, I mean, when you're a creative person, no matter what your situation is, you're just like a tree that is producing fruit. And hopefully your life is in a place where you can pay the most attention to that part of yourself. Because if you can't, it can be very detrimental to people. But you have to, it just comes out of you.
Yeah.
And
as the older I get, I think one of the things that's harder is I have more respect for people, for the greats. When I was, 21 and the Killers were starting, I thought, well, I'm just going to join the club,
And you did.
But it was like, now it's like, oh, you take it in and you absorb more of what's come before you. And now I just carry that with me around. Yeah. And it gets harder and harder.
Well, we were emailing when Petty died, and you said that you jumped back into his catalog, and I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate what he did over 40 years.
Yeah.
No one does that. I mean,
no. Incredible. Those are the guys that just make you, it's funny because they make you feel so small, but they make you go back in and work too.
Yeah. No, they really do. When you think like, wow, okay, he wrote Wildflowers when he was like 45.
Yeah, that gives me hope too.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. Now, there's not too many examples of that, unfortunately, but he's one of them, you know. We often think of gifts that we receive as one-sided propositions, like they exist simply for our benefit. But I think that's only one side of the coin. The other side is a responsibility that we have to that gift. Whether it's a God-given talent or an exciting opportunity or a 10-speed bike, when we're given something valuable, it's incumbent upon us to take care of it. I think that's what Brandon was talking about when he said he felt a responsibility to music, because it had transformed his life so thoroughly. And I think that inclination has really served him well, because the evidence is ample for what happens when you don't feel a responsibility towards your gifts. Music history is strewn with rock stars who got too much too soon and let their talents go to seed. And when that happens on any level, it can be a real invitation for bitterness to set in. It's easy to see potential wasted and then blame the world for it. And there's a portrait of that bitterness that's captured perfectly in Philip Levine's 1991 poem, You Can Have It. My brother comes home from work and climbs the stairs to our room. I can hear the bed groan and his shoes drop one by one. You can have it, he says. The moonlight streams in the window, and his unshaven face is whitened like the face of the moon. He will sleep long after noon and waken to find me gone. 30 years will pass before I remember that moment, when suddenly I knew each man has one brother who dies when he sleeps and sleeps when he rises to face this life, and that together they are only one man, sharing a heart that always labors, hands yellowed and cracked, a mouth that gasps for breath and asks, am I going to make it? All night at the ice plant, he had fed the chute its silvery blocks, and then I stacked cases of orange soda for the children of Kentucky, one gray boxcar at a time, while always two more waiting. We were 20 for such a short time and always in the wrong clothes, crusted with dirt and sweat. I now think we were never 20. In 1948, the city of Detroit, founded by Delamoth Cadillac for the distant purposes of Henry Ford, no one wakened or died, no one walked the streets or stoked a furnace, for there was no such year. And now that year has fallen off all the old newspapers, calendars, doctor's appointments, bonds, wedding certificates, driver's licenses. The city slept. The snow turned to ice. The ice to standing pools or rivers racing in the gutters. Then the bright grass rose between the thousands of cracked squares, and that grass died. I give you back 1948. I give you all the years from then to the coming one. Give me back the moon, with its frail light falling across a face. Give me back my young brother, hard and furious, with wide shoulders and a curse for God and burning eyes that look upon all creation and say, you can have it. So in getting ready for this interview, I stumbled on this really, really crazy fact about the Killers, and specifically about Mr. Brightside. Mr. Brightside has been in the British Top 100 every year since 2004.
Yeah.
That is so unusual for a single. And I read some commentary by some music writers who were throwing out a lot of different crackpot theories as to why they thought that was. And it astounded me because, to me, the answer is so simple. And it's that whether consciously or not, you write in archetypes, and you write in universal themes and universal ideals. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Brightside is the archetypal song about betrayal. And we've all betrayed people. We've all been betrayed. Mm-hmm. So it's no mystery to me. And so I'm wondering how conscious you are of those larger themes and archetypes as you're in the moment writing.
Yeah, I think it's nice to when you tap into it, but I've never sought out to do that, but it's definitely in the back of my mind. And I knew that there was something special about it, but I didn't know that it was going to translate and transcend the way that it has and have, such mm-hmm. Staying power or whatever it is. But I think you're right. It's just it's so familiar to so many people, that experience. Mm-hmm. And I haven't gotten tired of it.
No.
Yeah. And so, at the time it was cathartic and all that, writing it, and it's mm-hmm. true, and it's, so maybe that's also something that people are recognizing on some, universal level that I can't explain.
Yeah. But when you're writing, not just that song, I find that those archetypal themes run through like all of your work. Like I think, like my favorite song of yours is Only the Young. But you're not aware of that as you're writing. You're just trying to get a specific story into place?
Yeah, trying to find... I wish I wrote... I don't know how do you write lyrics first or...
I used to for many years. I've been in a rut though, so I've been experimenting with other stuff. I have a feeling I'll end up back at lyrics again now.
So I've only done that a couple times.
Okay.
And so I'm sort of waiting for it to come and to emerge or present itself somehow. Just something. Mm-hmm. And, you hear about Paul Simon, who would just go for it and try to stumble upon a line or whatever and then build on that. And I think I do that a lot.
Okay. And build it like kind of the, it's like the kernel of the song that you can, and it almost feels like once you have that kernel, you're accessing like a very strange, like mystical part of your brain for that kernel, but then finishing it once you have the kernel, you're using a part of your brain that you use to finish crossword puzzles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to describe it.
But it's hard to get that first kernel. Are you typically sitting down at a piano, or are you or doing it to a track? Or?
Yeah. So it's, piano is my instrument. I'm not a great piano player, but I can get around on the chords, mm-hmm. and that's basically where I spend most of the time writing. I've written a couple things on bass but I don't know. I only know 2 guitar chords. So, but I do. But it's more. The songs I have written on bass have been more up tempo.
Okay.
So it does work out.
And do you have a spot at your house where you write, or do you go to an office?
It's funny.
Or a
I had
studio,
on this last album. I have a fancy room with a baby grand in it, mm-hmm. and I've written some good songs on that piano before, but we have an upright in the house for the kids, and I wrote most of the stuff on the upright, just in the living room with noise everywhere, and telling the kids to shut up for a second so I can like get an
iPhone,
a little recording, and that ended up being more fruitful for me recently.
Do you set aside days to write, or are you just kind of you got a couple things percolating as you go about your daily life and then bang them out?
I think about it. I'm thinking about it all the time, pretty much, and I know some people, work, some creative people will work in almost, like a 9-to-5 kind of a thing.
Yes.
And set out time. And I haven't quite done that yet. Yeah. But I'm surprised that when I do go in, how quickly 3 hours goes by, and when you start going after one of them. Yeah. And how frustrating it is the next day if you go back and listen to it and it's not, and it wasn't any good.
And it usually isn't very good.
Yeah. And you can still, it's just like, why can't you tell in the moment sometimes? I don't know. Like we must be optimistic, just really optimistic or.
Yeah. But I would just absolutely zero perspective. I had an album of mine that shall remain unnamed that when I made it, I was in love with it, and then about a year after that, I hated it. Mm. And then I was in a club recently getting ready for a show, and there was some music on in the background, And I just thought to myself, like, this fucking rips, man. This is nice. And it was that album. And I just hadn't heard it in 7-8 years, you know, and I just had no perspective when I hated it, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. In the early days, I didn't listen to people's opinions as much. Mm-hmm. And then you get I don't know if it's humility or what it is, or just some kind of wisdom that you get, and you start wanting to listen to people more and hear them out. Mm-hmm. And I find that that's not a positive thing. You know, when I knew what I wanted and I don't want to hear anything else that anybody has to say, mm-hmm. and I see what I'm doing, I think that's the best.
That's the zone where you are. I think you can, when you're consulting with other people like you're talking about, I think you can make very good music. I don't think that you can make like the art. You know what I mean? Like those couple songs, you know, I think if you're lucky and you're very productive, you'll get 3, 4, 5 of them in your life. And I don't think those songs come from bouncing it over to, you know, your manager or your bass player to say, what do you think of this? If you have to send it out, I think like you already know what you think of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I've just been there a bunch.
I need to rethink my life next time I want to send an MP3 to somebody.
Yeah, just think to yourself, you know what, it probably sucks. Well, looking back over the last 10 or 15 years, career-wise and music-wise, what are you most grateful for?
Oh, man. I'm thankful for some, you know, maybe it's particular songs or just in general what it's afforded me in my life and been able that I get to do this, you know, mm-hmm. because I don't think I wasn't, we're from we're not that old, but before everybody was getting diagnosed with ADD and all of these kind of things, we're from that time. Yes. And I just realized now looking at myself and how I behaved in school, and I mean, I was not college material, or I wasn't, you know, I would not have been a great business person, or, you know, my parents didn't talk about that kind of stuff either. Mm-hmm. You know, they were just, I wasn't really prepared for that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so lucky because I am able to, I don't have to, you know, struggle with what a lot of people I think, you know, struggle with in that department at least. Yeah. And I was able to find something and do something that I really love, you know. Yeah.
And it's meaningful and meaningful to a lot of people besides just you, which, you know, some creators, you know, they never figure out a way to do that, you know?
Yeah. It's, so there are definitely nights where you can just feel a song translate, and I'm really, you know, grateful for that. Yeah. Or a song like we wrote a song called Runaways on mm-hmm. Battleborn, and I was at the grocery store, and this kid came up to me that worked in the produce section, which is where my dad worked in the produce section, and his dad, Otis Flowers, worked in the produce department, and he had his whole gear on and his blade and everything, and he said he just wanted to talk about Runaways, and he said his girlfriend was pregnant, and he talked about how he didn't want to be that guy in that song. And it was like, and I really, you know, it touched me because, you know, I don't want to, that's why I'm writing that song too. I don't want to be that guy either. Yeah. And it was amazing to see this young kid that he understood it and he digested it, and it made him want to be better. And it's like, those are the kind of moments that, you know, have really make it worthwhile.
Wow. Yeah, and there is that. It's funny. You are very famously such a staid family man, but you are able to access with your creativity. Like, you are not afraid to just drive it right into your shadow. You know what I mean? Do you feel like that's been therapeutic for you in some ways? Or?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes it's given me a way out when I'm struggling to write. Mm-hmm. And so that's definitely been beneficial. But because what is it, storytelling, and what, you know, you sometimes it's just being good at eavesdropping or watching people or whatever it is. And so I try to do that, but
you like kind of just observe?
Yeah. And then, but like you said, I think it's nice. It's given, like I said, when I'm struggling, it's given me a way out when I've just been able to look at myself in the mirror too.
Mm-hmm. Dude, thanks for taking the time.
That's
man.
cool. Thanks.
I really appreciate
this is
it.
good.
Thank you, dude. That's our show for this month. Thanks for listening. The Killers' latest album is Wonderful, Wonderful. Available everywhere digital music is sold or streamed. Today's episode was engineered and mixed by Matt Schusler. Research and editorial direction provided by the intrepid and thorough Paul Barbagallo. And wrangling and extra help provided by expert TM Jeremy Bates. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.